In the spring of 2005, I began my student career at Regional Airline Academy. I lived in student housing with two guys named Steve and Justin. I prepared a place where I would do all of my studying, donned my new Regional Airline Academy uniform, and headed off to Williams Gateway Airport to check out my new school. It wasn't long before I made friends with Andrew, another Minnesotan attending Regional Airline Academy. This was my first visit to Luke Days. I spent the first week or so just cruising around checking out my new stomping grounds. I was liking it. My roommate Steve owned his own Cessna 310 Turbo R. One day he told me he was flying up to Vegas and asked if I would like to ride with. I couldn't get in that plane fast enough. We cruised right over McCarran Field and right over the Vegas Strip, baby. This was exactly what I was lacking. I needed a program that taught me how to be a pilot that didn't include calculus and physics. Between the classroom and learning how to fly the simulator on my instrument rating, I spent many long days at Regional Airline Academy from Monday through Friday. The evenings I worked hard studying, but the weekends were always left for exploring. I had never been to the American Southwest and had no idea what was waiting for me. It was this time that I first fell in love with the state of Arizona. Even Brad came down to visit me in Arizona. I picked him up at Phoenix Sky Harbor. We changed into some comfy clothes, and then I took him for fish tacos at, where else? Rubio's. Our basic trainer at RAA was the Piper Cadet. Andrew asked if I wanted to fly to Lake Havasu. I said, yep, I want to fly to Lake Havasu. It was a gorgeous day to be flying, and Andrew made an awesome approach and landing into Lake Havasu City. Once we got landed and got the plane all secure, we headed out in some ground transportation to check out the town. I stood there that day looking at the London Bridge over the Lake Havasu Canal, looking at all the boat traffic, and I said, someday I need to come back here. I've got boating running through my blood, and this is my kind of town. I am standing on the shores of Lake Havasu in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Andrew and I flew over here, and now we're just checking out the lake activities, and then in about an hour we'll be back in the air heading back towards Phoenix. Pretty beautiful area. The flight back was mine, so we swapped seats. I took off and made a nice big sweeping climb out over the canal in Lake Havasu City. What a gorgeous town. The next morning, as I was climbing in Bill, Andrew was walking by and asked where I was going. I told him I was headed out into the desert to do some geocaching. He had no idea what that was and said he'd like to come with and check it out. We cruised around that day looking for old coffee cans laying in the desert. How I never found a snake or scorpion that summer is totally beyond me. Anybody with a passion for aviation goes bananas over aircraft. And if you want to see airplanes, there is a lot of airplanes sitting in the desert. One thing I have learned is how crucial slowing down and connecting with nature is to my happiness. Everywhere I go and everywhere I look, it seems as though people are just trying to complicate you. Well, screw that. The best thing about a road like this is that everybody on it understands everybody else. That's a rollover zone. In the words of the late Edward Abbey, the older I get, the more I prefer women to men, children to adults, animals to humans, and rocks to living things. I don't know if I'm ready to give up people in my life, but rocks sure are nice. Hell, Bill prefers rocks. If you keep finding signs of humans, you just gotta keep on going farther into the wilderness. And when you find that magical place where there's no sign of another human being, make sure you leave it that way. One night, my flight instructor Genevieve and I climbed into a cadet and headed to Yuma. She told me I could just take off my instrument training hood because there was nothing out there but darkness. It was our plane and another plane that night that landed in Yuma together and tried to figure out where to park. As we climbed out of our planes that night in Yuma, we were met by armed guards with assault rifles and told to lay down on the ground. After a couple minutes of heavy questioning and discussion, we learned that we parked by mistake on the U.S. Customs ramp. Oopsies. The previous night on our flight to Yuma, I had noticed there were some wildfires burning near Florence, so I drove down with Bill the next night to see what I could find. There were definitely some fires burning, and right next to the road. I probably got a little closer than I should have, but I tried to stay as safe as possible. Then I thanked the guys that were there working into the night and headed home. I had never seen a Joshua tree before. Back in Nevada, destination Hoover Dam. This was before the new bridge was built, and it was so amazing to get up close and personal and drive right over the dam that night. I continued into Vegas and snapped this photo, one of my all-time favorites. The next day I headed back to the Hoover Dam, just standing there, admiring this marvel in engineering. Gave me so many questions. I had to know more. I went straight to the visitor center and found out there was tours and you could go inside the dam. I signed up immediately and headed down into the depths of the Hoover Dam to see all the water turbines and ask all the questions I had about this feat of human accomplishment. I had been working relentlessly on finishing my instrument rating in 1 month. As soon as I passed my check ride, I treated myself to a flight back to Minnesota to visit my family and friends. There is only one thing better than seeing the Minneapolis skyline. Seeing the Lindstrom skyline, of course. There is no greater feeling than returning to the place where you grew up. I will always love this yard, and I will always love that house, the way my parents left it. It was evident to me right away that Weston learned a few tricks on the trampoline while I was gone. Alan and Ashley heard I was in town and showed up to say hello. I even got to hang out with my brother Jim. Love you, Jim. While I was flight training in Arizona, I left my pet ball python, Sally, with my nieces and nephews. She was doing very well. Man, I missed that snake. I think Weston was on some trap team that year, and I went to Chisago City to watch him shoot. It was the middle of May, and they didn't have the boat dewinterized yet. This was just no good for me. I told Dad, we gotta get this thing running and get her out on the water. So we got everything in place and took it out on the St. Croix River and cruised along the Osceola train bridge, one of my favorite places to boat in the old pickle. On the morning of fishing opener in May of 2005, I was standing on the shores of Grand Point in Center City, Minnesota, and witnessed one of the most beautiful sunrises I have ever seen. Take a moment to experience the zen that I experienced that morning. Well, I climbed back on America West and headed back down to the desert. Nothing had changed much except that Justin was learning the ukulele. To celebrate my return, the guys took me out to Mill Avenue for a night on the town. My Hooters girls were right where I left them. The next morning, I headed out to Williams Gateway Airport to meet with my instructor. He said, "All right, let's go climb in the Arrow and get you started on your single commercial." I said, "Single commercial? Nah, let's go climb in the Seneca." And to this very day, I don't have a single commercial pilot license.